Good morning, everybody. Okay, we will start with the list of bills. Just have a quick one on page 1, the Southeastern PA Schools Trust.
That's the medical prescription insurance monthly bill.
Okay, that's every month. It's
Page 4. Okay.
Go ahead, page 4.
Page 4.
Page 4, the third from the bottom. Madison National Life. It says income protection insurance. Is that our workers' comp?
That's disability.
Disability?
I have one on the same page. There's travel for Carol Kajewski. Page 4.
Sorry, chiropractic specialist at Harrison, was attendance at a conference.
Okay.
Mine is on 13, next one. Anybody before 13? Maintenance upgrade IS system, probably you. It's Emergent LLC. Middle of the page.
Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the website.
This purchase was for the Chromebook initiative that we have at the middle school, 6th grade. Although the description seems somewhat confusing where it speaks to an upgrade. But the bill is for the purchase of 250 Chromebooks that we're using at the 6th grade level. A Chromebook, just a brief explanation, actually this is an exciting initiative. Chromebook looks like a small laptop, but they're very inexpensive. They were like $260 a unit. They're or $246 per unit because they don't have any hard drive in them. All the applications come from the web. So we're using that with 6th graders for an e-textbook. So
Yeah, this is the social studies initiative, and it is a case where the textbook is completely replaced by the use of technology.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of resources.
Is this a select group of middle schoolers or the entire grade?
6th grade.
it's the entire 6th grade social studies. It's just in the social studies classrooms, and every student has a Chromebook whose parents opt in for use with the e-textbook. And then in addition to that, they have access to Google Apps for Education, which is, you've heard about with the high schools previously. That's the online suite of tools, word processing, presentation, spreadsheet. The students can collaborate and use those tools at home as well. So it is an exciting initiative.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I have one on page 15. Okay.
Page 14, 1, 2, 3, fourth from the top, Franklin Chemical and Equipment. It's for operations. So what kind of chemicals are we talking about?
This is custodial supplies.
Okay.
15, midway down, grass management, operations charge.
Right, this is a landscape company that we use to augment our forces in things like trimming bushes and mulching beds.
have nothing till 31. Anything? So in the middle of 31, Borough construction. Just wondering what that pertains to.
That is another progress payment on the general contract for the construction of Harriton High School. It's based on the fact that this summer, we were able to do the final conversion of the 2 stormwater basins in front of Harriton High School. So the temporary risers were removed and the final outlet structure configuration was put in place. So that does not represent the last payment. We still have some money that we've held back based on one item that is still on a punch list.
Okay.
So the Harrington basins and everything now are finished? There's nothing else that's going to change up there?
They're finished in the sense that we don't believe there's any other construction necessary. Unfortunately, the Conservation District did not want to close out our NPDS permit. The reason for that is because the vegetation we had planted in the upper basin died. And they specifically told us that they would not close it out till we reestablished that vegetation. So we have, just this week, planted new vegetation. And so it remains to be seen how long we're going to have to wait till they're satisfied. There's an agenda item later in the meeting related to professional services to continue performing responsibilities under that permit.
Any other questions on the list of bills? Okay, purchasing reports and summary of bid results.
The first item is the musical instruments. So as you can see, we have the lowest responsible bidders for the various musical instruments that are being purchased for this upcoming year. And then the other bid, I'll let Pat kind of go more
Hold
deep.
on, Vic,
Yep.
before you go. Sam Ash Quick Corp, 24,000, 6 instruments. What are the instruments that are $8,000 a piece?
Chris has it.
I have, these are the instruments that were bid, I don't have the actual Sam Ash, what they were awarded, but they were digital piano, we have electric drum, triggers, saxophones, cellos.
All this is under Sam Ash?
No, that's,
Well, that's right, I don't have that.
we don't have the breakout
I don't
with
have,
us.
I can send you that breakout with Sam Ash.
That's really nice.
Thank you.
There's like every inch of the plot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this next portion refers to the bids that were opened last week for the permanent classroom additions to Penn Valley and Gladwin. And there were actually 3 bids. There was one for Gladwin alone, there was one for Penn Valley alone, and there was one for the combined bidding of the 2 schools. So I have Damian Spar here from Reynolds, who is going to go over the bid results.
So which one of those areas do you want? Which one should I pull up on mine? Which one of them is, are we talking about right now? From, that were emailed to us, which one is it?
There are 3 pages.
All right, but it doesn't tell me how to.
The first one is the one that, the first page is the one that recommended to accept. Page 2 and 3 then are the ones that are being rejected and are being rebid.
Does the top of it say?
Yeah, the top of it says additions and alterations, Penn Valley Elementary School, Project 241201.
It has 4 blocks of the various parts, and then at the bottom, the 5th block has what is recommended on page 1.
Okay, I got it now. It just, the title. When you email them to us, the titles are different than that, so that's why I was having trouble finding it.
Do you have extra hard copies? Because I don't get the package, and I didn't have the opportunity to print things out yesterday.
I'll get one sent over.
You got one. All right, so obviously, we're not happy with the way the bids turned out. The bids were exceeded greatly what the cost estimates were, and Mr. Spar will explain to you what we believe happened. Most of it has to do with the fact that we had designed the projects to use this off-site construction method where most of the classroom would be built in modules off-site and then brought in and craned into place.
Good morning. If you look at the next slide, you'll see, oh, I'm sorry, that's not. Do you have this slide first? Let's see. That's okay. Let's go with this. My apologies to the board. Both projects, bid separately and together, were considerably higher in cost than our estimate. The causes of those overages we found out through research with subcontractors and prime contractors after the fact were several fold. One thing that we knew during the design was that the cost of the subcontracts for modular construction were going up, and we adjusted our estimate during the bid or during the design period to accommodate for a cost increase that we knew was going to occur at that time. What we found out after the bids were in was that the cost beyond what that subcontractor told us and the basis of design subcontractor told us went up by $150,000 at Penn Valley and $200,000 at Gladwin. And that's information that we got from both the general contractors that bid and the prime contractor. And they didn't have much of an explanation other than what cost us more than we thought at the end of the day, which was not helpful to us because we budgeted around them as a basis of design with the thought process the whole time that if this works for Penn Valley and Gladwin, we would go ahead and use this type of construction at Welsh Valley and for the storage addition at Ballackinwood. Well, I can tell you now at the end of today, we're not going to be recommending that because we always knew if this didn't go the way we wanted it to go, we would go back to conventional or stick-built construction. The prime contractors and subcontractors. Yes.
I think it should be noted that the original estimates were based on experiences that architects had had in using these modulars in other places. So
that's correct.
Okay, so this is not the first time that Gilbert had designed this kind of work or done this kind of work, and it came out in other places consistent with their estimates.
Now, in speaking to Gilbert this morning, the modular subcontractor did admit to Gilbert that they have had the experience that we have had here before. Now, we weren't ever told this before, but we found this out in the last couple of days. We were aware that there was a potential for prime contractors and subcontractors not to want to use this method. And the best way I can describe that to you is to say that a lot of the work that's contained in those modular units that's done by that subcontractor is the work that prime contractors like to do. And when that's excluded, they're kind of left with work that's a little bit less desirable. Now, when we went out to the marketplace, we got a positive response and we had lots of bidders, and we did have a reasonable amount of bidders for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But the general contractors, we had a bunch of bidders that were on the list, and as I think not only as they decided that they didn't want to do that type of construction, but as they saw where the costs were going, they dropped out knowing that the costs were going to be higher than what our expectations were. So they did not look favorably upon using that method, and that limited our competition. So the general contractor pool was limited to 2 bidders that bid. And unfortunately, when you're bidding things like that in the bid marketplace, those contractors can find out very quickly, I'm the only guy bidding, or I might be one of 2 guys bidding. And that drove prices up. And finally, and this is one of the more confounding things, and this is part of what the modular subcontractor revealed to us recently, subcontractors that are bidding to the general contractor to do other things around the modular work, like if they're doing some painting or masonry or some other stuff, they were confused in looking at the scope of the work of what the modular contractor was going to do and what they had to do. And what that led to was higher subcontractor prices or misscope from the subcontractors to the general contractor. Unfortunately, that's beyond what the school district, the architect, and the construction manager can get to. We can educate the prime contractors, but if they're not educating their subs, that doesn't work out. And that was another thing that was noted. All of these things added up to significantly higher costs on bid day than what we anticipated. Now, with all that being said, we took a good hard look at this as a programmatic item across the whole building program and said, what are our options and what's the appropriate solution? Yeah, that's the one. So, and in revealing the strategy, if we were to accept the bids at Penn Valley, and there is a lot of logic behind the idea of accepting bids at Penn Valley, which were less over than Gladwin. If we accept the bids at Penn Valley, you can see that it creates a deficit of about $367,000 on that project. You'll recall at Bala-Cynwyd, we picked up a lot of money on the renovation on bid day. Conventional construction, more bidders, all that stuff. If we use the same estimates that we have right now for Gladwin and Welsh Valley, you can see it creates a program deficit of about $180,000. So we look at that and we said, if we make changes to Gladwin and rebid it using conventional construction, which causes a modification in timing for occupancy, but one that we can deal with because we have modulars on site, we have temporary classrooms on site, and we make an adjustment at Welsh Valley to go to conventional construction with an alternate to do the Bala-Cynwyd storage addition with the Welsh Valley project, which has been approved by PDE through the PlanCom process. What we're doing is, instead of separating the storage addition project out and having general conditions costs on that and Welsh Valley, we're looking to save money there. When we get through looking at all these items, you're going to see that we have a plan to get back down under budget while still maintaining those other costs within the costs that were outside of scope that we've been noting, still maintaining that within the budget. And
I'll just jump to it.
yeah, thank you, Pat. So in making an adjustment at Gladwin, we believe that, now remember, Gladwin's only about 5,000 square feet, 5,500 square feet of addition. If we saved $20 a square foot by changing from modular off-site construction, which we had accounted for a cost bump in that estimate that I told you about that happened during the design. If we save $20 a square foot at Gladwin, if you compare this table to the previous one, you'll see that there's about $110,000 reduction in costs in that blue number there under current estimate bid. At Welsh Valley, I'm sorry, yeah, $20 a square foot is $110,000. At Welsh Valley, we believe that with the competition and modifications that we're going to be able to make and not having to do some underpinning work and some things like that, we will be able to save about $10 a square foot on 26,000 square feet of construction. So that savings or cost reduction at Welsh Valley is about $260,000. So when you add the 110 in reduction to the 260, you're reducing that overage that we saw on the previous page by about $370,000. That brings the program back into budget by about $200,000, which is not significantly, well, I think it's about $100,000 or $200,000 different than what we were projecting before bids came in.
Can I ask a question? So this is going to require rewriting the specs, correct?
Yes.
And I have found over the years that when you rewrite, you tend to find more, you end up with more mistakes than when you write out in the first place. So I know that won't happen with you, but I just want to suggest that you be very, very careful in your rewrite of the specs, because a lot of times something gets missed in the translation from one to the other.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The key you're referring to is the scope of work that changes between the general contractor, and more of that mechanical, electrical, plumbing goes out to those three prime contracts. So we will be very careful to do that. And what we will probably do is take the standard front end type stuff that Reynolds and Gilbert traditionally use for all of our stick-built stuff, and we will compare those and really go through that well and make sure that we have that all covered.
Right, because stuff that was originally in the specs for the
the
general
modular.
contractor coming in the modulars is now gonna be.
That's right.
So we're gonna see a decrease in the general contractor, hopefully, but we're gonna see increases.
That's right.
On the prime,
That is
so,
exactly correct.
okay.
Jerry, based on your email last night, I provided some additional information. I left it at your seat there and have copies for the rest of them. So it was a summary of the construction documents estimate, which is what we're comparing the actual bids to. And then there's a more detailed email from, that's not what I was referring to, but
Yeah, it's the third page of that.
Underneath the,
Right.
underneath the agenda. Underneath your computer.
I have been speaking to contractors that looked at bidding project and didn't, and they are very interested in bidding Gladwin as a conventional construction project. So I don't believe, and this is important because we've had this discussion at this table, I do not believe that what happened with the prime contractors for general construction is indicative of disinterest in the marketplace about bidding or too busy of a marketplace or bonding availability or any of that. It's just a matter of some people like to do modular off-site construction and other folks don't. And the ones that don't, and there was even discussion of,
I'll do a more detailed.
they felt that some of the bidders that were bidding, some of the prime contractors, the general contractors felt that some of the folks that were bidding the job may get preferential pricing. Well, I have news for you. Contractors get preferential pricing depending on how they pay and everything else. And I think that also created an issue with biddership for general contracting.
Look, all that's well and good, but of course, this is extremely disappointing.
Yes.
I mean, we've been talking, it would have been good to hear that a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago. To hear it today is very disappointing. The numbers that you're showing there, of course, are just based on one bid, which we have to accept because, you know, the population is upon us and we can't suffer the time delay that you're proposing elsewhere. You know, we've paid a lot of money in consulting fees for advice, and we've been touting modular construction for a long time. You know, we've seen pictures of the factory, we've seen pictures of it being installed, and we've had lots of bids. The estimates went down from the budget. I'm not lots of bids, but lots of discussions about the budget. And to hear this now is really disappointing. I mean, it's almost as if everyone went on vacation and there was not enough communication with the marketplace. I don't know your world, but you know, to hear such confidence at every stage of the game about how it's going to work great. Now here, the day after bidding, that pricing just shot through the roof. People didn't know, they weren't sure, they were confused. That doesn't bode well for, you know, for what we as a group have done. So it's very disappointing.
I agree.
But I just want to point out that these numbers right now are based upon just one bid. We have not yet gone to the market. I understand you're saying there would be greater interest in the general market, but it's only based on one bid. We don't know yet what the market will say till we redraw the plans for stick-built and go out to bid.
And the only thing that I can explain about that is that when we go out to bid in the conventional construction manner, our collective experience, whether it's the district, the architect, or the construction manager, is significant in that regard compared to the specialty construction of these. And I am disappointed. I have lost sleep, but we have followed the marketplace. We have talked to the modular contractor. We increased the price as we've been told, and we unfortunately found out from the modular contractor that this is not a total anomaly. It has happened to them before. We were just never aware of it, and I guess they weren't going to tell us that because they didn't want us to shy away from that construction technique. So the good news is Bala Kinwood, you know, we were able to demonstrate as a team that we did understand the marketplace, and we were able to get good bid results there with conventional construction. And we believe we can do the same for Gladwin and for Welsh Valley, and I believe that your point is accurately made.
And you're correct, that we have no choice about the Penn Valley situation.
I understand. Well, you explained that in our. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the summary that we got. The Gladwin project as bid was 586,000 over estimate and 489 for Penn Valley as over the last estimate we got. Okay.
The cost overrun for Gladwin, from what I heard, it's driven in large part because of the modular unit. So I guess I'm surprised that even when you go to this, I guess, Sticks, we're still at a cost overrun over 300,000, which is somewhat significant. So that's somewhat disappointing.
I think that, and you're talking about this budget here, right?
Right, that you show a loss.
I believe,
Cost overrun.
and I will look, but I believe that cost overrun, the majority of that cost overrun goes back to when we had to adjust our soft costs across all the jobs. So it's not a cost. If you may recall, and we've talked about it, I'm not sure what you'll remember this, but when we originally looked at the budget, we have our total program budget bottom line. That was broken out among all 4 buildings with different pieces, including the construction, temporary classrooms if they applied, and soft costs. And early in the process, there was a soft cost percentage that was applied to everything. Right. And in some cases, like at Welsh Valley, it worked out very well. And in other cases where the projects got smaller, the soft cost percentage was not enough to cover those soft costs. So the overage that you're seeing there at Gladwin, that's that 300,000, is soft cost overage estimated, not the construction value that's estimated.
Okay, and in terms of, the cumulative, it's a plus. Since I've been on the board, been involved in 5 projects. Each project is looked at individually. And we focus on whether we exceeded the budget on each of those, and in all 5, we never did. And for 2 of the 3 projects 2 of the 4 that you have up there, before even a shovel goes in the ground, we're over budget, and that's disappointing to me, because we've always taken pride in making sure that every project, the high schools and the 3 elementary schools that I was involved with, everyone was under budget. So.
And we've basically lost the benefit of bidding both projects at once.
Interestingly enough, as we expected that to be a bigger benefit than it was, and it was not.
I understand, but you weren't bidding it as stick-built, which you're now saying was the right way to go. I mean, we've just completely lost that benefit.
Yes, we did.
I asked the architects to be here in case you had any specific questions for them.
What's the time frame before you're able to go out to bid again for Gladwin?
We will be out to bid for Gladwin. I think that we have in your schedule to back this. Being out for bid at Gladwin really in late October, beginning of November, so that we can award in December. And we can actually have contracts notices to proceed in January to allow for procurement, particularly of steel and those long lead things, and that way we can start building foundations as soon as the weather breaks.
So if we're not going to put a shovel on the ground till the weather breaks, would it be to our advantage to delay bidding and have the bidding take place at the beginning of the fiscal year instead of the end? As I recall in the past, there was advantages to bidding at the beginning of the year when contractors don't have anything on their books for that given year yet, as opposed to bidding at the end of the year where everyone's already hopefully met their expectations, and now it's just extra timing in terms of the fiscal year. So I don't know if if the timing of putting the shovel in the ground is the same either way. Is there a benefit to, one, giving us a little extra time to make sure that the spec documents are fully vetted and what we want, and 2, take advantage of the bidding climate at the beginning of a fiscal year as opposed to the end?
I never shy away from being given more time to make sure documents are good. However, in this case, because we're bidding it at a time frame when contractors would know that they would get the award at the beginning of the year, and they really wouldn't be booking business until the beginning of the year. I think we kind of deal with that whole start of the year versus the end of the fiscal year thing, and it depends on when their fiscal years fall. However, we want to bid it as quickly as possible because we want to be able to procure steel so that as soon as foundations are in the ground, we can get steel going and get the shell on and do that. So the schedule aspect of it, I think, is paramount in this
Okay.
case.
And then my other question is regarding staging. Now that the entire project is going to be built on site, is that going to increase the amount of staging area that we need? Is that going to increase our staging costs?
We have looked at that, and I actually believe that it will be easier for them to build this using conventional construction at Gladwin than it will to have used the modular off-site, only because it's a little bit difficult to get back in there. It's easier to get in at Penn Valley. It's closer to the road. It's a little harder to get back in at Gladwin, and we do not have to make the staging area notably bigger or anything like that. We have looked at that.
And is the timing on West Valley changed at all?
The only timing that has changed at Welsh Valley is that as we looked at the schedule very thoroughly, and we had always thought this might be the case, the duration of Welsh Valley has extended out through the summer because we have a significant amount of heating, ventilating, and air conditioning work that needs to be done when children are not in school. So we really need 2 summers to do that, and we can't just do it over one. However, the start date of Welsh Valley and bringing up into time the bidding of Ballackinwood Storage Edition so that we can bid that as an alternate and hopefully take advantage of the general condition reduction. That's not changed from a month or 2 ago.
Chris, could you just talk for a second, not to put you on the spot, but why it's urgent that we move ahead with the one project now rather than wait?
We did not add portables at Penn Valley, and so we we made the assumption that we would be utilizing classrooms that are right up against where we're adding the new classrooms, based on the fact that it was going to be modular construction, so that when those units are lifted into place, the rooms that we're occupying would be vacated for days, but not months. And so Penn Valley is full. I mean, very full. I've been there several times since the start of the school year. And we're counting on having those new classrooms in place for next year based on the number of kids that we have there already. So we don't have any flexibility, and if we were going to rebid that project, we would have to go out and add portables to the Penn Valley project in order to accommodate the kids in September. And if we did that, it would boost the costs above what the deficit is on the modular bidding that we received.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an agreement with InfoSnap.
Hi, can I ask you a quick question on Walsh Valley? So the boiler project will be separately bid. Is that number still in the Walsh Valley estimate? So it's an apples-to-apples number, you're just going to take it out of the bid?
Yeah, if you recall some of the documentation that maybe you've seen over the past couple months, we identified loading dock improvements and the boiler project that were really not part of the scope of the original budget for the program. We've still kept those in, and that's a significant amount of money that's included in the cost when we show you that we believe we can still be under budget by $200,000. That's all still in there. So if you were to take that out, that savings or that being under budget amount would go way up. But what we're trying to do is meet the budget, be under the budget, and still include those 2 scope items.
Okay.
Although we'll bid it out as a separate project, we will account for it in that total budget.
I just wonder, we have a budget, and then we go out to the market casually, not casually, but, without bidding, and we have estimates. I wonder if we shouldn't be adjusting our budget to the estimates, because it's the more accurate number, rather than taking the benefit of some larger number. I'm not just throwing it out there for consumption.
And we are with the.
I don't want to feel comfortable just because we came under budget when we have, additional information, more specific plans, go out to the market, get new numbers, and if they happen to be less, I mean, that's really, it should be the new target, not,
And we have been making those adjustments along the way and doing that. It's just unfortunately with what has occurred to us has been much more significant in many ways than we understood before, which is your point before. But we will continue to do that. It's good advice.
all right, thank you.
Good morning. The InfoSnap product will allow us to do two things. One is start new student registration process online. So parents will be able to begin registering their son or daughter, their child online, and then after completing a portion of the online registration, an appointment will be made with them, and they'll come into central registration and complete the registration process, making the registration process more efficient. In addition to that, we hope to use the InfoSnap product to allow parents to update their emergency contact information annually rather than doing it via paper. So we're hoping to accomplish those two things. I know it will make the HSAs very happy if we can accomplish that emergency information update faster. Right now, it's still very manual. There's a piece of paper goes home, the parents make corrections on a piece of paper, it comes back, and it's manually entered by central registration. So we're hoping to make the process of registering a child more efficient and the process of updating emergency contact information more efficient. What you have is a contract that is not completed yet. We've been trying to work through this contract with InfoSnap. Obviously, we're moving very cautiously into this contract because we are talking about parents and guardians' personal information when they're going through a registration process, and obviously their emergency contact information. So we're trying to move through this process very cautiously. So the contract that you've received is not satisfied yet, although our solicitors have been reviewing it. We've been moving back and forth with the company. I'm requesting a provisional okay to move forward with this contract if the contract is approved by our solicitors. I'm requesting that because we're trying to hit a deadline of 1 January for this coming year's registration process. This product is not something that's easily set up. We have to create forms, custom forms for us. So there's a lot of legwork that needs to be accomplished in order to make that work. So if we were very close to having this finished, but we found out just yesterday that InfoSnap's counsel is on leave for some sort of medical reason. I don't know what. So when we thought we were at the finish line, things suddenly stopped. So my concern is simply if we wait another month, we're going to be very close or miss that deadline of January 1st to have this product ready for next year's registration process. So I'm requesting a provisional approval of this as long as our solicitors obviously agree and put their stamp of approval on the contract. I think that summarizes where we are.
Anybody have any questions?
When you say we're close, what's the scope of unresolved issues in the contract?
There's some smaller things like timeline and testing. We're kind of breaking their normal mold. We want to test it for a period of time before we actually commit to the product. But the larger one, and I'm going to ask Vic to talk about this, is the liability insurance.
The section about limitation of liability, the language isn't satisfactory to what we want. The reason why We, the district, have insurance coverage if the network was hacked into or if our folks did something wrong. We have insurance to cover that. Where we don't have insurance is if InfoSnap does a mistake or commits an error and it's their fault, their insurance has to provide coverage. And the way they have it worded here, they have gross negligence, which we don't like. We want to scratch the word gross, and they limit it. Then that gets limited to the amount of payment in that particular year. So we want to basically broaden the liability exposure on InfoSnap, and the wording isn't satisfactory to our solicitor's office. So that's one of the main things that we're trying to work on right now.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do. We have the emergency system, right, where we make the phone calls and go through. Is this a similar, where we have a, do we have similar types of liability insurance for that? I mean, is this a similar kind of, right, because people's information is in there? I mean, we're concerned that, I'm hearing from you, unless I'm hearing incorrectly, so I'm trying to get a sense, is what we're concerned about is that you have people's personal information. Right. So you want to make sure that that's protected, and then you also want to make sure that, you know, the system works so that if you need to get that information in an emergency, I assume you have it, right? Those are the issues of concern? I'm just trying to understand what the issues are.
Certainly. And there's a tipping point in the amount of information that we provide to third-party products. So in the case of the emergency messaging product, we're providing phone numbers and email addresses, typically pretty public information. It's when you start combining information that it becomes precarious. So in the case of central registration product, where people are putting in more information, their address, perhaps medical information, billing information. So my concern is we've hit that tipping point with the amount of information that would be provided to this product. So a product like School Messenger, where it's a limited amount of information, we haven't going to this due diligence to ensure that the insurance is favorable for us.
That's helpful, thank you. That helps to clarify. So is there any other type of system we're using now which is comparable, that we've already been through this process, or is this a new, you know, where you feel like we've hit a tipping point? I can't think off of the top of my head what that might be, since we do have so much personal information, or is this a sort of new, is this a new situation for us?
Well, this is certainly new ground for me in saying, like, well, wait a second, you've got a lot of information out there. How are you handling that? And interestingly, when we asked that question, they came right back with, well, we have insurance. It wasn't initially in there, so they've been to this rodeo before, that school districts are saying, you've got a lot of PII, personally identifiable information. So this is the first time that I've examined a contract like this. As we renew contracts, we can ask those same questions about, well, what's the degree of information? What's the risk? Does it hit a tipping point that we need to examine it the way we are here? What makes this, this is hosted. It belongs, all this is on their equipment, on their servers. So we don't have control of the security. So that's really was the first, that really was the first sign that said, all right, well, if this PII is on your servers, what are you doing to protect that? And that's what led us to the liability insurance.
In order to implement this in January, what is the drop dead date for the contract to be signed?
Well, there's really two parts of this, Gary. Within this agreement, we're saying we want to test it first. So in order for us to just start testing it, we have to supply the agreement. But within the agreement, we say we can back out if we're not satisfied with the security of the product. So after that testing window, the contract would already be in place. I'm not answering your question well. From our estimates, we'd like to have this thing signed this month so that we can start working on it now. That'll give us fundamentally October, November, and December, 3 months. Their estimate is 90 days to set up the forms, so that would give us the 1 January window. So now, we'd like to do this now.
Are they aware of the time pressures that we're under?
Oh, yes, we've conveyed that several times.
And in the event there's no meeting of the minds on this one issue, what then, what's the fallback? I mean, do we walk away from this product and look for an alternative?
Well, yes, we can. We did look at other products before selecting this one, so we can go back and look at those other products again. We can continue registration as we have since centralizing registration, and then hopefully we'll have another product in place before the beginning of the school year, because that's when we want to use it for its second purpose, and that's parents updating emergency contact information.
And is this provision a deal breaker? If they come back and say, we're not changing the language, is it the recommendation that we don't enter into the contract?
Well, we would, at that point, we're asking who's accepting the risk. And I can tell you the conversations that we've had to date, we're not comfortable. Go ahead.
I think if the language is in the limitation liability section is not changed to what we have requested, I think it's a deal breaker.
Just as importantly, and more importantly, are we satisfied with their off-site protection?
Well,
Forget about the contract language. You know, do we have a sense of what they're doing? Will we be able to somehow, you know, stay up to date with that? This will be a multi-year product if it works well.
And in contracts like this, you'll see language that says something like, we will use best practice commercial products for security. They don't actually get into, you know, we have Cisco versus SonicWall versus some other product. They don't, what you get in these contracts is, we'll use best practice commercial hardware. And I think I'm mangling that phrase a little bit, but we're not going to get from them their exact security practices. We could certainly ask, but
so 6 months from now, if you wanted to know what they're doing, would you have the right to inquire and satisfy yourself?
I have already inquired. I've already asked those questions right out of the gate. We asked, well, it's hosted. What are you doing? How are you ensuring your compliance? How often are you auditing? And we've gotten back pretty standard language, which is we use best practice and commercial products, or whatever that phrase is. And that's what led to the insurance. So I could certainly go back and ask those questions again.
I'm really asking you what your thoughts are. If that's what's typical and you accept it, you know, that's fine. You don't have to do it on my request. I'm just asking if it's a concern for you not to know what they have from time to time. Do we have other databases like this with all this personal information hosted off-site?
Yes.
And what did we get in those circumstances?
I think similar language to what George said. We have our financial hosted off-site, and I think the same way. I think it talks about standard practice. I think there's a SAS like 77 compliance.
What is that?
State of auditing standards deal with security.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that a little slower. What standards?
Statement of auditing standards. So when our auditors come in for data control, data security, data reliability, there's a statement of auditing standard that informational companies have to comply with. So they've been audited, and they have basically their auditors have certified that they're in compliance with that standard. So that was in the SunGuard agreement we did 3 years ago, and this is our 3rd year into that particular product. We've experienced no problems whatsoever with data loss or data security or hosting offsite. So that's 3 years as an example that we've had success with that. And we have language in there similar that protects us.
Past experience is no guarantee of
I
future
understand that.
performance.
It's a different company. I understand that. But, you know, that's kind of we're not the only district that's doing that. I mean, so it's pretty standard right now.
We don't need to belabor it here, but it would be interesting to know if we think we have a responsibility, if we kind of look at this a little deeper. I'm more comfortable with a great protection, with greater protection safeguards at the software host than good language in the contract, than I am with good language in the contract and lousy protection. I just wonder if there's not some thought we should look at that and see what they have. I don't think we have to be there in their offices. I think it's a periodic item, but I don't know what's involved. So maybe next month we can just chat about that outside of this discussion. And separate and apart from this, your inquiry about InfoSnap, or your request regarding InfoSnap.
So Joe, are you okay with us moving forward? Put a motion on
anybody?
subject to final approval by the solicitor, to be
Okay.
okay with that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is to review contracts for transportation with 2 vendors. The background on this is that every year we use vendors to supplement our own transportation assets. In some cases, we use them for activity buses, that could be sports or other extracurricular activities. In some cases, we use it to satisfy transportation requirements for special ed students. So this past year, we decided that we should formalize these agreements and make sure that we have an agreement in writing, and make sure that, even though we've had this before, we have the certificates of insurance on file, and we have the appropriate background checks for the personnel. So these are the first 2 that we've been able to bring to you, signed by vendors. I've asked Mr. Reinier to be here this morning in case you had any questions about this. We do have others that we are trying to finalize. These contracts are written so that there's standard rates, and then we can call the vendor as needed to fulfill our requirements.
How often do we use these kinds of services? Is this like a single student? We need it for a single student in a certain situation, or? Good morning.
Could you make sure the mic is turned on?
Good morning. In the past, what we've done, it's individual students who have individual needs. We have a student who is in a group home and it's determined that they need to go to Devereaux, Mapleton. In the past, what we would have done was referred these students to the Montgomery County IU, and they would take care of the transportation. But we had a feeling that we weren't getting possibly the best price, and currently we went to Atlas in Germantown, and one student, we received a price from Atlas. They're doing it for $8,800 less this school year for the student than the IU was. So now we have these vendors. When we have these students, we'll go to all 3 and say, what will you charge to do this? And then we can utilize the best price. And as Pat mentioned, these folks have experience in student transportation, and they have all the clearances and the proper insurance.
And do these students require any special accommodations of any sort? I'm thinking both physically or in terms of emotional support or anything like that. And are these companies trained and capable of managing that?
Yes, some are ride restrictions, that the student cannot be on a vehicle more than 30 minutes. We currently have one student that needs a special needs aid with them, and these vendors have experience with other school districts, and they do have staff that are trained and can act as aides on the vehicles.
Yeah, there are a variety of circumstances that are driven by student IEPs,
Right.
that have implications for travel. For the most part, we don't do individualized travel, but we do it here and there. And we just had an occasion where a young person was on a bus and already this school year encountered difficulty, and at least on a temporary basis, we needed to provide individual transportation for that person who attends an out-of-district school.
I just had 2 questions. I want to confirm that council, our solicitor, has reviewed.
Yes,
Yeah, approved the form.
they
Yes, they have.
provided this template for
And how
us.
about our insurance advisors on the insurance amounts?
Reviewed it also.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you're aware, Pat mentioned, these are just 2 contracts now. As throughout this year, as we get the other contracts signed, you'll be seeing more of these in this particular year. Our plan is, starting next year, is we would have one motion at the start of every school year with a list of all the contracts. So you won't get a periodic at the end of the year. We'll have everything prior to the school year to be approved by you.
And this is not the first time we're using these companies. We're trying to formalize our relationship and make sure that all of those things are addressed, because we have had a history of using various companies for transportation.
So Chris, somebody might ask, why aren't we just doing this with our current transportation facilities and resources?
Jerry's but the best
Yeah,
person to
this
answer that.
exceeds our capacity. We are not able, as we mentioned, a number of them are used for the athletic trips, and when a school team needs to go at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all of our 117 buses are already assigned and are not available, so we have to go to.
Safe to say this is a lot more cost effective than adding more buses and personnel?
Yes.
Okay.
The way we typically handle a sports is that because we don't have a bus available to take students to where they need to go at the end of the school day, we'll hire a contractor, but we will do the return trip with our own people because they will be available later on. And in the case of the special ed students, our first move is always to look and see if we can include that new student on a route that we already have. Can we make an adjustment on the route? Do we have another bus going out to the area where this particular school is located? And if the answer to that is no, that's when we'll turn to the vendors. And basically the IU is another vendor. They have contractors they work with.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna write this down so I don't forget. Two things. I know the use of the buses, we take a hockey team to wherever they're going and then we send back. When was the last time, or do you do this regularly, do we reevaluate whether it's more cost effective just to hire someone to do both sides of the trip rather than to have them do just one side of the trip, come back, and then send one of our people out to get them? I'm thinking not only in terms of driver costs and rental costs from the company, but also, cost of fuel, cost of wear and tear on the vehicles. Is it getting to the point where it might be more cost effective just to use the outside vendor?
We've asked them for the price, and what they come back with normally is you're now requiring our driver to remain there for 4 hours, and that brings the price up.
I realize it'll bring the price up, but my question is, in a cost-benefit analysis, is it still higher than sending our own person back?
All of the prices we've gotten when we've asked that question is yes. At this point, it's higher, and all of the vendors are reacting to the new healthcare initiatives, and they have to pay their employees more, and so it's more difficult for them, and it's become more expensive for them to provide the service.
And I can definitely see that when you're talking about a varsity and a JV, and you have all the time in between, and so it is 4 or 5 hours start to finish. But in situations where it's only one team, and so it's only maybe 2.5 hours on the site, I'm sure you're doing this. I'm just encouraging you to continue to look at that, so that we can do the most effective. Plus, when we pull our drivers away from the district for those trips, and we don't have them for trips, or return trips and things like that. The other question I had, and since you're here, I'm asking you, it really doesn't have anything to do with what's on the agenda, but we have talked about a number of times doing a bus census in terms of finding out how many kids sign up to use the transportation, how many students actually ride the buses. You will hear anecdotally from different places in the district that, I never see a full bus and blah, blah, blah. And, that's, you're not making decisions based on those anecdotal stories. And so I know we have not done a census in a while, and I'm wondering if is that something we can do? Is that something the board would encourage? I mean, we're looking at possibly needing more buses if our population continues to increase, and I just want to make sure we are using the buses we have as efficiently as possible. So I don't know who wants to comment on that from the administration.
We can certainly do that, and we constantly, especially on the high school routes, call the parents after the driver comes in and says the student hasn't been here for 2 weeks, and we call the parent and say, do you intend to use the transportation? And a lot of them say, well, when it gets darker or when it's cold, we would like to know we have the bus out there. And, but we can certainly get counts and, come up with some reports on what the ridership is.
And, I mean, I think with activities and things, at the end of the day, maybe we have a different bus route at the end of the day than we do at the beginning of the day because of so many
The
kids.
challenge at the end of the day is that kids might do a fall thing and they're not on the bus, but they are back on it in the winter and spring. It's just, we do have a seat for that kid. And if they're, fall, winter, and spring involved every single day in some sport or extracurricular activity, they're not on the bus.
Right, but I mean, can we then, if there's, I don't know, what do the buses hold? 60?
The legal capacity is 72, but that's 3 elementary students in each seat.
Yeah, our
so
practice is for secondary, it's 48. It's
Right, but if
super-
legal capacity is 72 and we have half the kids on the bus are playing a fall sport, a third of the kids are playing a winter sport, so we never have the full contingent. Maybe we oversubscribe a bus by raw number, but in actuality, the bus is being used at its capacity or even still less because we've assigned the number that we're allowed to by law, but we know we'll never have. And in that one rare instance, let's say we have all 72 kids show up. One day they drive and they're uncomfortable on the bus. I don't know. I mean, I just don't think if we, I just think we need to be a little more thoughtful and efficient in how we fill the buses.
Okay, just one comment about the afternoon routes being different based on the ridership is, if we get into a situation where we're changing stops, I mean, it's not uncommon to have one bus stop in the morning and a little bit different bus stop in the afternoon. But if we start changing these during the school year, that causes a lot of concern for families based on other arrangements they've already made.
All right, any other question about that, or you want to move on to Barry Ozette?
Okay, the next item is...
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jerry. The next item is related to additional professional services for Barry Ozette. As I mentioned earlier, we thought we would be closing out our NPDES permit this summer or late summer, and in fact we are not because we don't have the vegetation established in one of the basins. So they have provided us a cost estimate if this went all the way through to next spring, and then we closed out the permit. So the amount is here, as you can see. These services are done on an as-needed basis. If we're successful in convincing the Conservation District that we could close the permit out early, then we will only use what we need and we won't use the rest of it.
I actually have not been paying attention the last couple times I've driven by the school. In the basins, is the geese string still up there, and is that plant? And if it is that going to stay?
The goose protection strings have been removed.
Okay.
We're relying on the dogs at this point.
Yeah, because and the cyclone fencing is down. It's
Yes,
just
I
the wood
believe
fencing.
it's all down.
Okay, yeah, I have to go. I haven't, as I said, I've not been very
That
observant
was
the last
temporary
couple
construction
times.
fencing.
Right, that's what I thought. And as I said, I just haven't been real observant the last couple times I've driven by.
Just as background, this contract with Izette, they're overseeing this work because to save cost, we let the borough people who are overseeing the overall project, go from the project and allowed Izette to oversee this piece of it. Am I correct?
I guess I don't understand the question.
I'm just the background, the origins of this contract with Izette were, there was other oversight, I think, from borough.
Right,
for
when
this
the
piece of
project ended in summer of 2011, we basically ended the construction management relationship with Foreman. And then we've been using Barry Izette to continue to do that construction management as we've gone on with the follow-on work.
Yeah, we didn't need the 2 layers of oversight.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay.
Okay, the next item is the review of Plan Con D and E for the Welsh Valley project. You recall this is the one project we're doing through the Plan Con process, and we've reached the point now where we have to submit Plan Con D and E. Plan Con D is a project accounting based on estimates. Plan Con E is to provide information to the department on the status of design at the stage of design known as design development. And I can tell you that the cost estimate that was updated as part of this, which is the design development cost estimate, has not increased from the last one you saw. Any questions? The next item is change orders. There are two of them. One is for a paving project we did this summer at Belmont Hills. We had to make some repairs to the asphalt, the paving, and the bus circle, and we anticipated, we had ended up having to do additional sidewalk and curb replacement beyond what we had expected. The contract included unit prices for these, so this is based on unit prices. We went ahead and did the work because it needed to be done, and we had to get things put back together for school. The second change order is...
Excuse me, Pat. So you did not email those change orders, or am I?
I believe they were emailed yesterday.
Because I have the yesterday's email up here, and...
Did you scroll all the way down? There's a lot of attachments.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, is the attachments, and there's not one with change orders on it. So,
It was part of the big PDF,
which one?
the really big
It
PDF.
started with InfoSnap?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The really
Starts
big
with
PDF?
InfoSnap.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, all right, the one that's,
You're
okay.
Three-quarters of the way in.
Oh, all right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's better, yeah.
Oh, thanks. I'm still combining old school and new school.
Okay, so the second order, change order rather, is related to the interior modifications that were done this summer at Ballackinwood Middle School. We have shown pending change orders in the monthly report that show the status of the contingency that we've set aside, so this was included as part of that pending change order. Now we have finalized it. There are 3 different sub-pieces to this. The total amount is $9,500. This is for the general contract.
Pat, I hate to ask this question, but I have to. There was a door added for $3,300. Why was the door so expensive? I know there's talk about pieces of framing and hardware and et cetera.
Yeah, I believe that was a fire-rated door.
I believe that was the door that is behind the reception desk.
Right.
And it's, it was an unusual situation because of how deep the wall is and basically a special frame for the depth of the wall and fire rating, and it really is in between the finished space and more of a raw space that exists between the exterior wall and the finished space. So it was just specialty door hardware and a door that caused that price to be that high, and we did vet that.
And then the next change the floor width from 4 to 6 inches, but it doesn't explain, I don't think, why that was needed.
It's actually related to demolition. We had anticipated that the floor slab was 4 inches thick, so the contractor bid the job based on that. Turned out to be 6 inches thick, so he's entitled to some extra money for extra work. This was as part of the demolition of the space when it was still a locker room.
Yeah, the information we had on existing conditions
Was
was
wrong, okay. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to give a quick update on the projects for this summer. So Damien's going to review the summer work real quick.
We occupied the Gladwin modulars on September 16th. Township has provided approval for occupancy. I was actually with the township when they provided approval for both Gladwin and Welsh Valley modulars. Welsh Valley was occupied on September 17th. There are some punch list items in each area to be dealt with, but none of which I believe are adversely affecting operation. There's some staging area work to be completed at Gladwin. There are temporary whiteboards because the modular contractor did not order whiteboards, and we actually went and got whiteboards from a neighboring school district that are on loan to us for temporaries so that they can be used properly in the school classrooms at Welsh Valley. And the district, we've ordered whiteboards to install on our own and back charge the contractor, and I believe they should be in next week sometime. There are photos of each. Now, Gladwin finished a little ahead of Welsh Valley, so you're seeing really the finished work at Gladwin. This is a temporary classroom. There are coat hooks and things behind that wall. That's the corridor. At the end of that corridor, I believe that's facing where the bathrooms are, and that door at the end of the corridor is where you would walk out and go to the school. This is nearly completed. The picture was taken was nearly completed, the Welsh Valley modulars. And you can see the path and the ramp that goes from the school to the temporary classrooms. And this is, again, right before it was completed, but you can see the casework in the typical classroom, and that's indicative of 4 classrooms.
And just, Welsh Valley is fully operational. I was there on Tuesday with teachers and kids, and the teachers were really pleased to have the space. One thing that Dr. Gilbert mentioned last night is that in some ways the Welsh Valley building is not generous in terms of space. And so the teachers were really glad to be in the modulars because they kept saying, it's so big and I have so much storage. And I'm thinking, it's big and you do have storage, but it's big and there's storage compared to the traditional classroom at Welsh Valley, which is not big and has no storage. So it was, rather than feeling inconvenienced by being in the teachers in the portables, they're like, great, happy to be here.
And I could tell you, just based on what I've seen this week, teachers moved in and made these rooms their own. So on Saturday, 3 teachers from Gladwin worked. So Monday morning, I mean, you walk in and it was a 3rd grade room, complete with all the things you expect to see on the walls and the special rug on the floor and all that. So.
Ballackinwood, the township provided approval for occupancy. We occupied the new administration area on September 5th, and we occupied new classrooms on September 3rd. On September 3rd, we did have 1 person stationed in the new administration area. We just elected to move in on the 5th. There's punch list work to be completed there that we're monitoring. We are now on night shift at the former administration area, and with the exception of this week, I believe, Tuesday night, maybe you had open house there at Ballackinwood. We did not work that night, of course. We're expecting to complete the work by the end of October, and our change order costs are within the contingency, and that continues to go well from that cost perspective at Ballackinwood. We've just been pushing the contractors to make sure that we're getting out of them what we need. This is a classroom that is down in, I want to say this was the former wrestling room area. And these are the classrooms, an example of the classrooms down in the former locker room area. And that is your new main entry, which I think turned out well, given the architecture of the room. And that is, in fact...
Could you go back a second?
Yeah.
So is that coming from the driveway?
Yes.
So you say it's a new entrance, but if I'm an outsider coming in after school, I mean, at any time, those doors are closed and I have to go to the left where the new office entrance is, the secured entrance is? Okay.
Right, I'm going to show that.
All right.
Wait, before you
More
get there,
detail.
so the classrooms in the old wrestling room and the locker room, do they have windows?
The classrooms in the
No.
old, I think there are small windows in the
Not in the locker rooms. The former wrestling room.
former
they do,
wrestling room,
yes.
yes, small windows, but not in the locker rooms, that's right.
Are those doors new? Completely new?
Completely
Yes.
new.
Yeah, they look very nice.
Right, I'm going to talk about the security projects in a minute. I'd like to point out that having re-examined my conscience, I would agree there are 8 additional classrooms at Ballackinwood.
I'm going to leave now on a high note. This is the summary of construction contracts. At Ballackinwood, you can see that we're well within the contingency. At Welsh Valley, we're going to be up at the contingency, and just for your information, at Bala Cynwyd, Welsh Valley, and Gladwin, Pat and I just looked at the two projects and set those contingency numbers based upon some preliminary conditions. So I'm not surprised that we're under on some and bumping against on others, but they're all part of the overall contingency for each one of those buildings. But again, doing well at Bala Cynwyd, doing well at Gladwin, and at Welsh Valley, we had some additional work to make sure that we could get done in time, as well as some site work costs and additional fencing and things like that. So we're going to push those costs down as much as possible as we close out the jobs. But overall, we continue to do well. And I think I made an error there at the bottom where it says 30.8 in the bottom corner. Should have been a negative there, and I did not do that.
Right.
Create the slide.
Quick question on Welsh Valley, to recover the time schedule. These are requested change orders? They're not finalized yet?
Correct.
So is there a discussion over who's responsible?
I was just going to point out, all three of these locations, there will be what I will describe as intense discussions about what these final numbers are going to be. We invested a lot of money in overtime because some of these projects were delayed, and I intend to get as much of that back as I can.
I know Welsh Valley had people crawling all over it on the weekends.
Yes,
Right.
including me.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a quick update on other projects, which are primarily security-related projects. I can walk you right through Bala Cynwyd here. We're standing outside of Bala Cynwyd. This is the floor plan for the new office that's been relocated. We added the vestibule doors, and now during the day, those vestibule doors, which you commented on, are locked, and so visitors are required to go through the office as shown in the red arrows.
So you do still enter the regular front door, the entrance is to the left inside, not the left outside?
Correct,
Okay.
and so there's the new door to the left that will take you into the office. And the doors to the right are the ones you saw earlier, which during the day are
I
closed.
think the important thing is that the entrance to the new office is before you get into the lobby of the auditorium.
Correct.
That's where those new doors were.
Correct. Another picture of those doors, and then another picture inside. And to your left is the door where visitors would come from the outside and then be checked in. Looking at Penn this is a picture of the school courtesy Mr. Google. And I want to point out that on the side of the school with teacher parking lot, we have created a new way to get into the building during the day. And what we've done is we've taken over a classroom that was right next to the entrance off Suffolk Avenue. That's the teacher parking lot. And so we've made that into a new administrative area. And that is the first phase of moving the entire administrative area over. Next year, we'll move the principal and conference room and turn his space into classrooms, just like we have turned this administrative area into classrooms.
Pat,
So-
can I just interrupt you for a second and pull that slide back? That area right outside those those windows, I mean, this used to be elementary or kindergarten, correct?
Yes,
And that was a play area right there?
yes.
Do the children still have access to that play area?
Yes, they do. If you
And
look
how do they
across the
get
building
there?
here, there are 3 classrooms across this building. So these 2 on the end are still regular kindergarten classrooms, and they each have a door to the outside where they can get access to this play area. You can see the little, I think they're turtles that are sitting in here in the play area. So what we've done as part of this project is we've added some pavement outside this door that we're going to use right here so that it's easier to get from this set of steps down to this door to go into the new entrance point after school is in session. So the idea was to bring people in that way. What we did is move the administrative area in and create a vestibule right there so that the outside door is open during the day, the inside door is locked, and someone comes in and either through visual means, because the secretaries here can look through the glass and see the visitor, or by means of a buzzer and intercom, the visitor has to announce himself and then come in and sign in. and basically then leave what was the classroom, go back into the hallway into the school. So that's a picture of the outside with the additional concrete added. And this is a picture inside of the vestibule area.
Pat, I just wanted to ask, is the glass special glass or just regular?
It's regular glass in the sense that it's, and I'll have to check on this, but I believe it's laminated glass, which means it's a safety type glass so that if it does break, it doesn't shatter into a million pieces. It is not bulletproof. Again, over at Penn Valley, we did the same thing, creating a new way to get into the school while the school is closed during the day. Again, a shot from Mr. Google. There's the main entrance to the school. And here is a picture of the setup. This is the main entrance coming in here. You enter to the lobby, and the main office is all the way over here. So we created this new area, a security vestibule, if you will, so that these doors can remain locked during the day, and our visitor can come in here. First of all, this door is locked, and so the visitor would announce themselves and then be admitted to here where they would sign in and then be admitted into the school. So that is what you see when you're in the vestibule, and that's our administrative person there to help check in visitors. And then this is the door that the visitor would use to leave that point and go into the main lobby. And we lined up some real live visitors for this picture.
And that person made me show ID and sign in the other day because she had no idea who I was. She's a substitute.
I think she was a sub, yeah.
Yeah.
I was asked to sign in, and they do know who I am, so I don't know how I'll take that, but yeah.
Everyone signs in. We do have a record now of everybody coming in and out. So the signing in part, I expected. It was the show ID. And I showed her my school district ID, and she said, "Do you have anything else?" Yes, I do.
The other part of the projects we've done this summer is we've installed access controls, i.e. doors that are controlled by card swipe at 4 of these schools, Penn Wynne, Penn Valley, Ballackinwood, and then Gladwin. We did a little bit of extra work at Welsh Valley to accommodate the modular. So in fact, in both cases where we have modular, the doors to leave the building and go to the modular and to get into the modular can be controlled by the card swipe. So we have 3 schools left to do this with, even though those schools already have 1 door that teachers can use to get in the morning. So that's our next task, and I'm hoping to have that finished by winter break or substantially finished. And then lastly, I'm extremely pleased.
Pat, excuse me, before you go on. Kinwood, we had proposals to enhance the security of the Kinwood entrance. We pulled them back. Any news on that?
We're going to take another look at that. You're right. I want to make sure that doesn't
But we want to
fall off
emphasize,
our
Kinwood
radar.
has a secure entrance. You can only come in if you're buzzed
Right.
in. You can only enter to the office. We don't like the setup.
Yeah, we were
and
trying to improve the
want to
setup.
improve it, but there was also the addition of additional cameras at Kinwood this summer and a monitor inside. Pat, do you want to explain that?
That's correct. We were able to replace the older analog cameras with new digital, and then I believe we added 4 or 5 additional cameras. The cameras can be viewed in the office one of 2 ways. We can set it up so that the secretaries, just using a simple website, can bring up and get a view of the camera. But in that case, we also bought a large monitor, similar to what you see behind me here. And it's able to project, I think it's up to 6 cameras views at one time. So the office staff can take a look at that.
The other reason to want to relocate the entrance is that the entrance that we currently use is not ADA compliant. So anytime anyone has an issue of stairs, we've got to make special arrangements, and that's really inconsistent with how we should be accessing a building.
Then, like I said, I'm extremely pleased to announce that the track is finished. There are some additional things to be done, but it is substantially complete and can be used. And I'm sure that every neighbor around there already knows this, probably knew this. Well, we have had to chase some people off while we were still doing the painting. But it went on longer. The painter didn't show up when we thought he would, but we were able in that interim to get our teams out and practice. There was, in fact, Tuesday soccer game held there. And of course, this Friday is the big Friday night lights. Is that how they say it? Friday night lights, with the home football game.
By any chance, did we have the track team test drive it? Pat?
I've not received any feedback yet through the track, from the track team or coach.
Perhaps Dr. Massey could do that before Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
okay.
has track experience.
I'll drag the hurdles out for you.
Okay, so I think we're finally at the point that everybody's been waiting for. I don't have a handout for any of this.
Slide.
Can we send that to the email upstairs and we'll get people?
Sure.
Email to Denise now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And this one was not on our
It
email.
was not. I'll get copies made.
And Diane, just to answer your question on Sam Ash, you asked for the 6 different instruments while we're waiting.
Oh, I got it.
Got it already?
Maybe it was you, someone emailed it to Chris. I just looked at it up. Thank you.
What was it, just for our curiosity?
It's a long list.
A long list. At Harrison Middle School, there's a series of Philharmonic chimes.
Philharmonic chimes at Harrington. Also at Harrington, there's a set of 5 camber, topper, timpani. Cymbals and straps at Walsh Valley. 2 basses with covers and bows at Walsh Valley. Brass trombone with a red brass bell. And at BC and at Low Mary's electronic drum trigger.
And I think the biggest ticket item was those timpanis. I think they were like $4,000 a piece.
14,000%.
Pat, excuse me, do you want to wait till Dr. McGee? Wow.
It's up to you.
Suba, we just lost a couple.
Yeah, we just
Sure.
lost it.
When they come back, we can start. Pat, how's the grass on the fields? Saw a lot of sprinklers going off this summer as, when it was closed for the track work. Has it come in well?
Right, we were able to open the grass fields on August 12th for fall sports practice. We turned out to be pleasantly surprised at how the grass turned out. That grass was less than 1 year old, and we were on it and playing. I don't know, Jim, do you have any comments about the grass? I have not seen it in the last 2 weeks.
Well, I'll take 2 weeks and a day ago.
I believe we were very skeptical in the beginning. It did not work.
We're televised, so if you can come to the microphone. Thank you.
We were very skeptical early spring.
Wait, what do you got going there, Jen?
I don't know. We were very skeptical early in the spring over the condition of the fields after the winter, and very concerned that they would be ready for the teams to play on. The contractor did some additional reseeding, and the district took over the maintenance of the fields and started with using our subcontractors for doing fertilizing of the fields. And I was very impressed how quickly the condition of the fields turned around, and by the time we were ready to utilize them for the start of the fall sports season, they really filled in and they were in excellent condition.
Great.
Rain, positive somewhere.
Okay, Pat, you can start.
Okay, so this is a presentation to talk about facilities planning related to the high school enrollment expansion. As the superintendent has mentioned in earlier meetings, we don't have all the information today. One of the big things that we're still waiting for is the results of a parking and traffic study, the data for which is being collected this week, and we will be able to talk in greater detail next month about that. In addition, as we present and we hear feedback, we would, we'll do additional work to answer any other questions you might have. So what we're primarily talking about when we look at enrollment expansion is facilities like classrooms and other support spaces, and then parking and traffic. So I'm going to concentrate mostly today on classrooms. I mentioned this last month, but this is our planning team that we're looking at. We have our own staff, of course, including Mr. Orlando. We're using the high school architect and civil engineer because of their familiarity with the project to look at questions related to additional classrooms or to parking. We have the team of Gilbert and Moore Engineering looking at any work to be done in the DAO. Moore was the designer on the previous project. And then our faithful traffic engineer, Frank Tavani, and our zoning and land development attorney, Fred Fromhold. One of the things this team did, was hold a meeting with the township staff in late July. And we met with the whole range of staff, the director of building and planning, planning staff, zoning officer, township engineer. I don't think we had the fire chief there, but anyway, we talked about some important things. We reviewed for them where we are and what the projections are going forward so that they would have an understanding of what situation the district is looking at. We made them clear on the timeline that the board has established for making a decision. Also made it clear to them the decision the board makes is about attendance areas. It's not necessarily about other things, but then that will drive potential construction. We talked about what would be required in terms of permitting and approvals, et cetera, for new construction and for the use of the DAO. We reviewed the previous high school land development approvals just to make sure that we were all had the same understanding of what was approved. And our focus at that point was looking at impervious surface and at parking. And again, as I mentioned, we do have the parking study planned for this month. It's ongoing. So let's jump right into the numbers here. What you're seeing here is basically 3 different scenarios that I've looked at for facilities planning. And the first one, and I've tried to color code these, is the original DeJong-Healy projection. And then the other 2 are related to implementing choice and then having 50-50 of people in the choice area select the 2 high schools. And then the next one is 40-60. That would be 40% Harriton, 60% Lower Merion. So this is really an extract of the tables that you saw last night and Monday night. Same numbers.
You have 40-60 for both. Shouldn't it be 60? If one's 40, shouldn't the other be 60?
The 40 is
I'm using the terminology to describe the scenario. So in that scenario, 40% in the choice go to Harriton, 60% go to Lower Merion. When we're looking at classrooms, we're really looking at the highest projected enrollment, which in our projection is in 2021-22. So these are the numbers that are at the end of that chart. And again, these are the 3 different scenarios that we're looking at. So what I focus in on is the highest projected enrollment to try to figure out how many extra classrooms we would need. It's not a real difficult calculation. Basically, the superintendent has described that we've determined the schools have a capacity of 1,400 students. So if I take the highest projected enrollment and I subtract 1,400, I take that number and divide it by 25 students per class, and I round up. That gives me a numerical calculation of what kind of additional classrooms we're looking at. And again, this is in the year 2021-22, and I'll show you later how this looks over time. So as you can see here, the scenario 1, which is status quo, maintain current boundaries, requires the most classrooms. And then you can see what happens with the scenario 2, scenario 3, 50-50, and 40-60. I have an asterisk on the 0 there because, as you can see, the highest projected enrollment at Harriton under that scenario is only 69 students over 1,400. And the superintendent's determined that if we're in that kind of a situation, we'd figure out how to make do without having additional classrooms.
If we're in that situation for a year or two, not for, a long term.
So I want to go over some concepts that we've looked at with the architects for adding on to classrooms at Harriton. And I'm going to show you permanent construction options and temporary construction options. And we're looking at the portion of the school that you see where the oval is right now. This is Harriton High School, again, courtesy of our overhead photographers. The stadium is on the upper right. This is the main entrance to the school right here. So we're looking at this area in the back right here, and as we look in here, this is our fitness room, and these are our locker rooms. So the concept that KCBA came up with to add permanent classrooms would be to infill this area, and this one shows a 3-story infill. So it's an extension of this 3-story classroom wing that comes over here and adds classrooms. So this is what it looks like on the first floor. And again, these are all just conceptual drawings from the architect. And you can see that we create a hallway where currently there's an exterior door and this is all outside. So we create a new corridor, we add 3 classrooms, we have a new exit to the outside. So if we go up to the next floor, we are able to add 3 more classrooms on top of the ones on the first floor, but then this concept uses the space above the fitness room for additional 3 classrooms. This is a concept they looked at for me in the springtime when we were looking at 12 classrooms. So in fact, you're going to see a concept for 12 classrooms here. If we're looking for fewer than that, this section right here, the 3 classrooms on top of the fitness room, would be the ones that we eliminate because they are the most expensive. The fitness room has a high ceiling in it, but then it has a lot of space above that ceiling before you get to the roof. So that's what makes it possible to do this. However, that space is also loaded with a lot of HVAC equipment. So if we can avoid doing that, that would be desirable. And if we had to lower the ceiling in the fitness room, that would not be desirable either. So again, if we didn't have to do this, these would be the first 3 that we would not do. And then, of course, to go on up, we just add another 3 classrooms on top of the footprint we already have. So that would see a total of 9 classrooms there as the extension of the classroom wing. And then if you were to add in the other 3, you would have 12. Again, this is what it would look like from the outside. So in order to get classrooms, we could look at a combination of one of the scenarios has a requirement for 6 classrooms. So we could build first floor, second floor, not build that. We get up to a requirement for 10 classrooms. We have 9 here, and if we actually need the 10th, we can get creative someplace else. I didn't want to have the architects redo this whole concept at this point. So the next thing we looked at was what would happen if we went on a temporary basis. And when we're talking about a temporary basis, we are talking modular construction, similar to what's sitting at Gladwin and Welsh Valley today. But we're looking at a larger building and one that we would intend to have in place longer than 1 or 2 years. And the best example I can give you is the M building that we constructed in 2003 and tore down in 2009 at Harriton High School, same place. This was a 1-story building. It had 8 classrooms, restrooms, and I think a teacher planning center.
They were science labs, right?
3 of the classrooms were science labs. That's correct. So this is a picture of what it could look like. The M building looked a lot like this. The architect has looked at 2 locations of where this could sit. Basically, it's in the same area as we looked at for the concept for the permanent additions, right outside the school where the fitness center locker rooms are. And this is a footprint with 6 classrooms. This shows stairs if we go to a second floor. This one shows toilets. The way I see this is if we get into this, we are going to have to readjust this. All the little colored balls are utilities. And we may end up impacting a playing field. I would try to set it up so it only impacts one of the two playing fields, but I think that's the situation we would be in if we had to do that.
And other districts have used two-story modulars, that we did for several years prior to that.
What do you do with the second floor in terms of accessibility?
I think that's a discussion we'd have to have with the architects and also maybe our solicitor. Obviously, it would be expensive to put an elevator in, but we may be able to, determine that we can offer our program to anybody without having to require them to go into a space that's not accessible.
You would plan around it?
We would plan around it.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the M building was put in place in '03. We tore it down in '09. I think that, a 10-year life expectancy before significant maintenance work is probably realistic for this kind of a building. And, right. So again, that's what it would look like. Some other considerations to look at is impervious surface, stormwater management, and educational programming. I can tell you that we have looked in detail at the impervious surface. We have about 30,000 square feet left at Harriton before we hit the limit that the zoning code requires. However, as you add impervious surface, even though you're under that limit, you have to add stormwater management to handle the stormwater generated by your additional impervious. So that was taken into account when we looked at this. We have, I don't have any pictures to show you, but it is included in our cost estimate. And then I will tell you that I haven't really looked at anything on educational program, exactly how we would use these modulars, et cetera.
Yeah, the initial discussions that we've had with the principal of Harriton have been, that these classrooms, some of them would need to be science labs because the science lab is an issue. That's not factored in here as a cost. The other spaces in terms of the rest of the building, like departmental planning centers, this assumes that all those things are housed in the main building, like the lunchroom and, all of those, the gyms, none of that changes. If we were to add on classrooms at Harriton, they'd be, we would try to minimize the specialty architecture that went into those rooms, but we know we have a science lab issue. It's likely under that kind of a scenario that additional science labs would try to be incorporated in the main building rather than out there, because an investment in that equipment would be longer term than the 7 or 10 years that you might be using a temporary structure. If the board were to elect to add permanent classrooms to Harriton, that of course gives us more options. But it assumes no other changes in the building. If Harriton's population was to grow following the original DeJong-Healy, it has implications, but it has the same implications that Lower Marine's going to experience in terms of the additional lunch period, needing to modify the schedules, but we wouldn't be changing any of those other spaces.
Pat, do you have a time frame for what it would take to do the two-story addition, or the two-story renovation, for each of these? Like, how quickly could we get, taking away the, well, not taking away, just what do you think, in terms of timing?
I don't show that. I do address that later.
Okay.
And I don't have specifics for Harriton, but obviously we could do that analysis. I would think that
I'm just asking ballpark, 2 years
I'm thinking for a building, even if one
temporary?
as much as 2 stories, that from design through complete construction, 12 to 18 months, maybe even faster. Yes,
Oh, it'd be longer than that.
for a temporary building? Right. Right, that's another thing.
You'd have to go to
You
land
through
development, so you're beyond 12 to 18 months. I mean, you're 24 or more months, even for the modular.
Okay.
Right? And then for full construction, you're longer term than that.
Right, you need to consider at least 10 to 12 months for land development, and in that time, you're doing the design of the building.
Is
that on?
Is the mic on?
Is that mic on? Yeah. Sounds on.
It is? You have to consider land development, and that time frame is typically 10 to 12 months, and during that time frame, you'll be doing the design of the building. And you're going to need to do that whether it's temporary construction or permanent construction. You still need to go through the land development process. And then construction, temporary would probably take less than the permanent construction, but it could be as much as a year to depending on the size of it.
So temporary would be 10 to 12 months for land development plus 12 months for construction at, or is it less
For
than 12 months?
temporary?
For temporary.
I think it would be less than that.
Okay, so 6 months for?
6 to 8 months.
6 to 8, and then for
New
permanent, it would be more like 10 to 12?
Months, 8 to 12 months.
8 to 12 months?
10 to 12
Okay.
months.
So you're talking about 18 months or 2 years?
Yeah.
For,
Right.
okay, I wasn't doing the addition there. So 18 months for temporary, 24 for permanent?
Something like that.
As if, you know, if everything went according to plan.
Right.
That's always a big effort.
All right, so here we go with some cost estimates. And the cost estimates were prepared by KCBA with the assistance of Barry Izett, and I've had Reynolds review them. In some cases, we adjusted the soft cost percentage because, as we know, the soft cost percentage needs to be carefully looked at for the smaller value projects. A couple of assumptions here. It assumes that on the temporary ones, we would purchase the units, and that's what we did with the M building. That's going to be more cost-effective over time. And there is money included in here to handle stormwater management to account for the additional impervious surface.
Are the permanent structures stick-built or modular?
They are conventional construction.
Thank you.
We will continue to look at these cost estimates, but I think, if anything, these are conservative at this point. So I'm going to switch over to Lower Merion now. In particular, I'm going to talk about the DAO building. And I'm continuing to use the terminology DAO. At some point, we may switch over and call it something else.
I know in the beginning you said parking hasn't, the issue of parking at this site was also addressed. but
It's
you're not-
being addressed.
Being addressed, okay.
Right. So this is the first floor of the DAO building. The lower portion of this drawing is facing toward Montgomery Avenue. So this is your main entrance coming in, and then here's our reception desk. So as the superintendent has mentioned in other meetings, when we designed the new high school, it was always our intention that a portion of this building be used by the high school. And in fact, the gymnasium, the locker rooms, and those 2 classrooms that I've highlighted there are available for the high school. They do use the gym, they do use the locker rooms. Right now, they're not using the classrooms, even though they are ready for use. If we move up to the second floor, this is the area we're looking at using or allowing the high school to use for classrooms. And this is 5 classrooms like we talked about before. There's also a small office there. We have administrative offices in these classrooms. The classroom configuration has been maintained throughout the building. It's just that if you were to walk into one of these rooms, you would see desks and office partitions and things like that set up. So the idea would be to make these spaces available to the high school on the second floor. And then when we go to the third floor, the entire third floor could be made available. And again, we're looking at 14 classrooms, but there are also some smaller spaces that can serve as offices, could serve as science prep rooms, et cetera.
Pat, on that second floor, there's that one big double classroom that's set up as a classroom right now. Right? Because you're using it for staff development. And then the 2 on the end, aren't they being used as classrooms for that after-school program?
We do use classrooms in this building on the first, second, and third floor for the after-school program.
Okay, but I'm looking at this pink on the second floor. I don't know what's on that end.
Okay, this is an office, so that person would have to be relocated.
Which is an office?
At both ends.
On the end.
At
Yeah.
both ends.
Okay.
Their offices, and then there's 3 classrooms that are classrooms today.
Okay.
But we use them for staff development, and we use them for meetings.
Yeah.
So again, there's the third floor. I want to point out that there is some off-limits territory right here. This is our district main equipment room, and this is the head end, if you will, for our entire network.
Just go back, Pat, because one of the questions was about the elevator and the restrooms. So the elevator does go to the third floor, and that's set. But can you just point out where the restrooms were located when the high school
Here?
Was using
here.
this building? And yeah, so both of those are the restrooms that at such time that we would be using the third floor would have to be redone along with the other HVAC work that we talked about.
And Pat, is there a thought of where the secure entrance for visitors would be if we use this building?
That is something I haven't thought about.
If you go back to the picture of the first floor, what we did when we were using this building as the administration building and the two-story structure was being reworked, we had a small entry desk at that entrance right outside those two classrooms, and that's where we would put somebody to monitor that. That's one of the additional staffing things that we would have to address.
Okay, so I mentioned before the classroom configuration has been maintained inside the building. The renovations that were recently completed.
Pat, excuse me one second. Excuse me, in the Harriton estimate, you broke it down between 10 permanent, 10 temporary, and 6 permanent. You don't have to go back, and 6 temporary classes.
Right.
Could you do the same thing here with either just the second floor or the second floor plus the third floor?
I'm actually going to get to that.
Okay.
But let me just go back to this was the determination. So that's why at Harriton I was focused on the numbers 6 and 10, and then over here at Lower Merion we'll focus on these other numbers. But really, what I'm going to talk about is what the principal talked about Monday night, is how he sees using the building, because it's when you add in the programmatic aspects of education, it kind of trumps the simple calculation that I've done here.
Yeah, we can talk about it later, but one of my questions will be about the estimates being 6 and 7 years out. And what we know is these are estimates. The numbers might be higher, they might be lower, but we know they're not going to be,
Right.
6 or 7 years out from now. And we know from our experience, again, nobody knows what the future will hold, but the numbers of students in the district sway up and down, to the point a few years ago we were going to close Harriton High School completely. And now we're talking about building extra classrooms on top of an already enlarged building. So I just would like to have some options to talk about, based upon the fact that those numbers are so far out.
All the estimates that I'm going to show you today are based on 2014 dollars. And they assume a 3% per year escalation.
I'm talking about the population, not so much about the dollars.
Okay. We did a lot of work to bring the building up to code compliance, primarily accessibility with redoing a couple of group restrooms, first floor and second floor, also an elevator, also sprinkler system. We completely replaced the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems in the building, with the exception of HVAC on the second and third floor. So basically the guts of the building were replaced. So when it comes to electrical feeders, we're in good shape. When it comes to piping that feeds hot water to the third floor for heating, it's there. There were alternates. The work was done. The design work was done. We bid it out. We chose not to select those alternates. As you know, we created the boardroom, and we are using other existing spaces for offices. This is what we would have to do, HVAC upgrades to the second and third floor. Since that design, I've gone back to the mechanical engineers, and we have figured out a way to reduce the scope for this work, second and third floor, so that it's a little bit different than what the original design was. As the superintendent mentioned, we have to do a group restroom on the third floor. In all the spaces, we have to do what I'll call classroom fit out. We have to go through and make sure that we have the right whiteboards, tack boards, data cabling, electrical, although I think most of that's in place. Make sure the ceiling and the lighting are straight, but I think most of that's in place. But we have to add a ceiling-mounted projector of some type. That's not a driver on the cost estimate, but it's something that has to be done. We've also have a cost included for potential science labs. And then because when we renovated the building, we changed occupancy from education to business for most of the school in the spaces we're talking about. I got the architects looking to find out what exactly would have to be added. The big things like sprinklers and egress and an elevator, we've already done all that. We're looking at things like, do we have enough lavatories in the restrooms? Do we have enough drinking fountains? And hopefully there's no other big surprises.
We actually did a plumbing analysis on the district administration office to convert that to classrooms. And the layouts that you had in the previous alternate that was bid and not selected, we're going to have to do a little bit of a modification. We need to add, I think, 3 sinks.
3 sinks, right.
The urinals and toilet fixture count were okay. We're also going to need some additional drinking fountains. So the other thing that we're looking at is the stairs and the egress width associated with converting it from a business use to an educational use. So we're in the midst of that. We're reaching out to the code enforcement officer to get his determination if our thinking is in line with what he's thinking. So we're in the process of doing that now.
Pat or whomever, the potential science labs includes, so that includes the plumbing for this, for the potential science labs?
Yes. All the mechanical plumbing that would be required.
Are there any old science labs up there that already have the plumbing?
No. And if
those were in that other
we would not
building?
reuse the
No,
plumbing.
well, yeah, but you would have the chases and you would have the space.
Yes, in
there.
fact, the rooms that we think would be most lend themselves to labs are the ones that were used for labs before, for some of the same reasons you mentioned.
But we saved the casework in those rooms just because it was
Mahogany?
beautiful old casework, but the actual like lab stations
No,
or
no, no,
that stuff, all
no,
that's
no, yeah, no, those were terrible. They didn't work.
Right now, this is our conceptual cost estimate if we did both second and third floor, and we add the science rooms in. I know last night it was, I think Mr. Novick mentioned that it wasn't here. You did. You did. Somebody mentioned that perhaps we ought to look at we look at an option where we're just pricing out the cost of doing the improvements for the second floor. And so I'll review that with the superintendent. I'm sure that's something we can do.
And so this is for all, not just.
Right, this is the entire thing. So again, 2 classrooms on the first floor, 5 on the second, that's 7 plus 14 is 21. This is what our classroom requirement looks like over time. So I've taken the same set of enrollment projections, same 3 scenarios, and I've done that same calculation for each year to determine how many extra classrooms we would need. So obviously it's 0 until we go up over 1,400. And I put the word numerical in the title because this is a straight calculation that we've done. And what I'm going to do now is zero in on the scenario number 3 because it represents a situation, if you would call it the most required classrooms at Lower Merion High School. We could zero in on any one of these scenarios and take a look at this over time. This is what I've changed it to based on Superintendent, or rather Principal Hughes' concept for how we would use the building. And what it really does is change these numbers I've highlighted in red here. And it kind of adds a couple of classrooms here based on the fact that he would be moving certain program over. And I think he was much more eloquent than I could be. So what I'm going to do is analyze it based on this. And so you can see that, just like he said, the 15-16 school year, he would be looking to use 4 classrooms in the building. That means you would be using the first and second floor. The second year, 2016-2017, we'd be looking to use 8 classrooms. And again, we'd be looking at the first and second floor. Wait a minute, Pat. There's 2 on the first floor and 5 on the second floor. 2 plus 5 equals 7. How can we use 8? We would get someone else to move out of an office on the second floor so that we could provide that space and the school could have a contiguous space there on the second floor. However, just like Principal Hughes said, when we get to 17-18, we're looking at having to do the third floor. So as I said, 15, 16, we're using 4 classrooms, first and second floor. 16, 17, we're using 8, but we're still on the first and second floor. And then when we get to 17, 18, that's when we need to use the third floor. So by looking at this, we can figure out when do we have to do something? When do we have to construct? When do we have to renovate, et cetera? And again, like I said, this could be applied to any one of these scenarios. I'm just using this as an example. We would want to be renovating the third floor the year before we're going to need it. So that would be in the 16, 17. And I've just drawn that line up there for illustration purposes. I think to do the work would be less than a year, but we have to add in design time. There aren't the same levels of approvals for this as you would for a brand new classroom. And the way I think we would approach this is we would go in and renovate the third floor, and then the following year the students would use the third floor, and then we'd be renovating the second floor. And again, the second floor is primarily HVAC. We already have the bathrooms, et cetera.
Why wouldn't we just do it all at once?
We could. It's just if we're in the 15, 16 timeframe where we have students on the second floor, then how do we work around that?
Well, I'm just thinking, one of the big drivers for building new as opposed to renovating was reducing the amount of exposure the students had to construction while they were being educated.
Okay.
And
You're right. It could be done anytime.
And by having students on the first and third floor and renovating the second.
No, I think in that scenario, I think the principal's idea was everybody would go to the third floor in the 17, 18 year. Was that correct, Dr. Marcy?
Yes. Yeah, we got it. We heard.
You heard? Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
But you're right. There would still be an impact with renovation going on. My thought would the second floor work would probably do on second shift, and you know, just depending on how much time we have is the limit on what our options are.
And that number of classrooms where you have 8 and then 9, it's not 9 that year. Right.
That is what I wrote down, but
Yeah.
I could be
That's
wrong.
not the right number. We'd be using, that's when we would kick it up, and I forget whether the right number was 12 or 14, but there's another number that we've been using.
What's the second red number?
The third red number. It goes 4, 8, but then I thought it was 12 or 14 for the following year. But they can be accommodated on the third floor.
So then on so in
You're right. He actually didn't give a number the other night, but okay, I'll adjust that.
So in this numerical requirement, then the LM number, so some of them are adjusted for education and some aren't?
The only one that we've adjusted is this one right here. You probably want to go back to this slide right here.
Yeah. I mean, because if you're adjusting for education, you know, we probably don't need 3 in the, well, I mean, there's adjustments all over the place that you can
Great.
make.
No, our plan, if the board is to do this, and we would be in the 15, 16 year 4 classrooms, the following year 8 classrooms, and the following year the 12 classrooms. That's what we've been, programmatically, that's what we need. So,
Right, but if you look at the pink lines, you know, you have 1459, you have 3 students, or 3 additional classrooms. It's not, I mean, we're still not even sure whether 1459 will fit in the buildings as we have. You know, tight but
Right.
uncomfortable. Certainly,
the 3 classrooms is just based
It's
on
just a numerical
round
thing.
number.
Right.
We're over 1,400. Every 20 kids is another room.
Right.
So that's how that was calculated. That's not a programmatic thing. That's just a head count of kids.
Right, and if you look at, and if you look at, you know, that LM high school line, you know, 1415, not year 1415, in 1516 it says 1415, we need 1 classroom. We don't really. So, I mean, there's programmatic adjustments to some of these lines, but not to others.
Correct. So in scenario 1, the status quo scenario, on that 1415, 1425, LM has access to those 2 rooms that we originally thought that health would be taught in those 2 rooms. and we have not done that. So those 2 rooms are there, so whether they use them or not, they've had access right from the beginning. And we've used them for various temporary things or special projects or, pulling groups together, but they haven't been part of the daily schedule of the school. So if we stayed in status quo, we would not really until in 14-15 or 14-15 or 15-16 necessarily be using anything other than what's here.
And just to when Lower Merion first opened, the first year it was open and grandfathering was still in effect, we were over 1,400. It was, I forget, 39 or
1427 or something like that for 30,
I don't remember the
1439.
yeah. I don't remember. I'm just throwing the number out, but it's in that range. Did they use those 2 rooms for class? So
No,
they were
because we were using all of those classes as offices.
Right, so they were able
Because that
to.
part of the building was closed.
So they, not ideal, but certainly no change. I mean, the program was able to continue in the way we had designed it.
We had classes in some rooms that were not built for classes, that had been built for storage that year. And on the second floor, that back room that has no windows or anything, we had classes in there all day long. So we used some things that were built for storage. Because we also had temporary storage containers on the lot and some other things.
Right.
So we couldn't push back in to some of those spaces because now they're used appropriately.
Right, but you could also put storage in somewhere, well, whatever. I mean, so my point just being, it wasn't ideal, but we were able to
Correct.
accommodate.
But it was seen as a 1-year thing.
Right.
And that's how the high school administrators worked it out.
Now for the covered walkway. We were asked to look at creating a covered walkway to provide shelter for students going from the new high school over to the DAO building. This is the concept that the architects came up with. They had a challenge. It was an aesthetic challenge. You'll recall that the DAO building is a Class 1 historic resource. That means it's eligible to be listed on the National Register. So their challenge was to come up with something that would basically bridge between the 2 buildings, but not detract from the historic resource. And they went through the same drill when we went to the new high school. We had to go see the Historic Commission, make sure the new high school was not going to detract from the historic resource. And so this is what they've come up with. This is, again, just a computer rendering. Here's another picture of it looking straight on. Here's another picture coming down the sidewalk. You can see that in addition to the large curved area, there's also side branches that go into the DAO and go into the main entrance. This is a view from overhead. So these were the areas I was talking about, right here and right here. And this is the cost estimate that we have today.
Pat, if it's a connector to the 2 buildings, why does it need to branch out and come back? Why can't it just flow into the building? Why do you need that at bottom part?
It could very well do that. Again, this is the first concept, and I think aesthetically, they were looking at this to maintain this curve. When they first showed it to me, I pointed out to them, I said, the shortest distance between 2 points is from here to here, so you've got to cover this. So they added that in.
That $600,000 is not included in the $4.5 million number.
Correct. Just briefly about traffic and parking. The studies are in progress now. Once the traffic engineer takes all his observations, he's got ways to project to the future, and I'll be providing him with the additional enrollment scenarios. And so when he gives us his report, it will reflect, what potentially could happen in the future. One of the things I learned in coordinating with the township this summer is that the township can make us add parking if they feel necessary. And there's 2 ways they can do this. One is they can do it through the land development process if we come to them with a project that requires land development. The other way they can do it is if the zoning officer becomes aware that there is a shortage of parking on one of the high schools, then he can investigate, and apparently he can order us to make adjustments, whatever that would be. I just wanted to go over with you what the zoning code.
In regard to the parking, when will the township be getting back to you to give you some sense in terms of what the requirements are going to be for each location, each site?
The purpose of this slide is to show you what the code requirements are, but ultimately, the answer is we're going to sit down and negotiate with the township, first with the staff and then with the commissioners. And I can assure you that these zoning requirements, we don't have these in place now. The 1.5 spaces for the students of driving age generates about 350 student spaces for each high school. We don't have that now.
We only have 100, in fact.
We have 100 here.
Yeah.
And
we have more than that in Harrison.
Can we do some work at the high school level and find out in reality what that ratio should be? I mean, we now have 4 years on 2 sites where we had enough parking to accommodate
That's
every
exactly
student
what
asked.
Frank is going to be doing. He spent most of Monday talking to the assistant principals at both high schools about the student parking program.
Because, I mean, that 1.5 to 2 is probably,
It's a huge number.
It's much bigger than what, I mean, we've had now 2 buildings where anybody who wanted to drive was allowed to drive, right?
You know, I don't think that's the case at LM, but I don't know the answer because I don't know exactly what the current practice is, but I will know once Frank gives me his initial report and if I can go to the assistant principals. The previous approvals we got.
Excuse me, just at each high school right now, we give students permits
Right.
to park. So we have a count on that.
Right.
So, and at LM, it's limited to about 100 kids. In the first year, we had just about 100 kids put in for it. The demand has exceeded that, but we still issued 100. And that's the parking that we have. So that's the reason why what's here is not what we have, and we're going to have, whatever we do or whatever we don't do, we're going to have a conversation about parking at the high schools. That's got to be a negotiated issue with the township.
And you're exactly right. We'll look at the historic performance. That is how we got our parking approved at Harriton, because we had a track record up there that we could show. And based on the total student population, we could show how many spaces we really needed, and that's what we did. When it came to Lower Merion, the situation was very different because this site was non-conforming both for impervious surface and for parking. And in that situation, our plan was we were adding parking to the site. We went from like 406 spaces to 430 spaces. So based on that, the township didn't make us break out an allocation for this or that, although those numbers were talked about during the approval process.
But prior to the new building, there were a lot of issues with where students would park in neighborhoods.
Correct.
So subsequent to the new school, have those issues continued, or we have less issues with the neighbors with parking?
My understanding is we have less issues. No specific complaints have come to me as of last spring. The commissioner here has said that she hasn't heard any specific complaints. I can't tell you that no student is parking in the neighborhood, but I think the whole issue that concerned neighbors is greatly reduced.
Pat, if the township decides not to reduce the requirement and we make changes and the requirement gets imposed, what are our options at that point?
Okay, I'm not prepared to, I wasn't prepared to talk about that today.
Just generally speaking, you don't, no detail,
Okay.
but.
On each high school, we have a lot of impervious parking space taken up by these big yellow things. There's 24 buses at Lower Merion, there are 25 buses at Harriton. If somehow those buses could go away from those sites, that's impervious surface that already exists that could immediately be put to use for parking. And in each case, Lower Merion, we would gain about 74 spaces and about 75 up at Harriton. And that's a combination of 2 things. It's the space freed up by the bus itself and the fact that the drivers and the aides are not parking there.
So just very generally, because I know we're not there yet, but if you move those buses, if the township does determine, I'm not saying they will, but if they determine that we won't get relief from these requirements, and we move the buses, let's say from Lower Merion to, I mean, we've been down this road before. I assume the availability of space where we can park these buses is no better today than it was however many years ago we went through the exercise before. So if you move them somewhere out of the township, let's say, there's, aside from the cost of buying that space, we incur, we pay our
There would be
drivers for
additional
the time.
operating
So
costs, sure.
you have wear and tear on buses, cost of fuel, and people's time. Aides, drivers, because they're now parking off-site, maybe well off-site, depending upon where we find land, if we find land that's appropriate. So there's a large hidden cost in this.
Right, I think, Vic, didn't you have a rough number per year of what it would add just based on driver's time?
We looked at, just throwing out a number,
Well, Vic, excuse me, we don't even know where this is going to be, so I don't want you to venture, because you're basing on some
Yeah, it was
assumption.
really-
I don't want to get into
Your
that.
statement is certainly correct.
Yeah.
Your statement is certainly correct.
Okay, and we'll explore
And
that.
you're correct that that would be an ongoing cost to the district every year.
It doesn't stop just because we bought a building somewhere or some land somewhere else.
Other options are that we could build additional surface parking at each high school. At Harriton High School, and when it comes time to show you this, I'll have all the graphics. But along the western driveway, that's the driveway between the two basins, there were approved back in 2008 20 reserved parking spaces that could be built along that driveway, parallel spaces. So there's a cost to do that, but if you did that, the impervious surface for those parking spaces is already accounted for because it was reserved parking, and as is the stormwater management. So that would be one of the first things that you want to do is go there and get your 20 spaces. And then on this site, even though we have very little impervious surface left, we think that we could put some additional surface parking, but it's on the order of 10 plus spaces. And then
We're really, at this point, getting ahead of where we are. I mean, we laid out a timeline that takes this conversation into November when we have the traffic study and the parking study completed, and we'd have a better sense.
Agreed. I just wanted people to understand it's not just a matter of whether they accept these things or not. There's a pretty significant cost involved in moving these things off-site.
Right. There is a significant cost involved for parking, no matter what the board does or doesn't do. There is a significant cost that we're going to incur in order to provide additional parking. And no matter how cooperative the township is, we still need one space for every employee. And so there are things that they couldn't waive, even if they just wanted to be, super nice to the school district.
well, I don't think we would want that situation where we couldn't have
Right.
a parking space for all employees. One of the things that Frank will look at is the visitor activity, because we may be able to, I think we did this previously, we may be able to make a case that we in fact don't need one space for 25 students, that we could get away with less, and that'll help us a little bit. But that'll be part of his analysis. So these are the next steps that I see: complete the traffic and parking study. Once that's done, we'll have the same team go back and sit down with the township staff. I've already talked to them. They know that's coming, so we can figure out what is the art of the possible. And then we will continue to develop information based on input from the board and others.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
I just have a question about, there obviously needs to be some corrections made on this, on these slides, but are we going to put those up?
The reason why this wasn't in your packet is because this is work that we've just been completing.
No,
and so,
I
yeah,
realize that.
in terms of the classroom expectations, we'll modify those classroom expectation
cleaned
things
up
so that
and-
they're more consistent with what we see as appropriate programming, not just consistent with,
Right, okay.
the numbers of kids.
And just as a follow-on to that, will we present any of this to the public at our meeting Monday?
Yes, at the risk of being completely repetitive of everything, there are highlights from today's meeting that we want to share on Monday night. We want to report on the 10-day enrollment, so we don't want to repeat everything from last Monday, but there are some things from this week that we will report on Monday evening. at the start of the meeting, and there are some things that we said we would report on. That one that we discussed last night, which was the 10-day enrollment, but that's something else that gets reported on Monday evening.
I would say that Pat has a lot of skills, and one of his great skills is his ability to report highlights in a quick manner, but in a way that gets the messages across. I think that would be helpful for Monday's meeting.
Can I just suggest one other thing with the next steps? I was thinking, some of these future classroom spaces in this building have, say, 3 or 4 staff members in them as an office. So that's, if we move them off-site and return it to a classroom, that's 4 parking spaces for staff that, where theoretically it's only 1 teacher. So now we've created more space in that regard. But my question for next steps would be, where then do we put those people? And have we thought about, I imagine Rock Hill Road has some space, although I don't know that for sure. Have we thought about where we're putting those people? And because I think that in terms of the big picture, we have to factor that in as well.
We can look at that issue.
Any questions or comments from the public?
Pat, you're not going to put up your Serenity Now slide?
The last slide. Yeah, please just, it's as usual, state your name. Yeah, see if that mic works.
Ma'am, if you could just sign in at the sign-in sheet by Mr. Ganan there.
Make your comment. If you could sign in after you speak.
Super. Thank you. Good morning, Rosa Sirota Winwood. I would like to thank the board and Dr. McGinley for airing these meetings. Last night's meeting was incredibly informative, and this one will be also to the public, I'm sure. I wonder if you can really consider, you can't at this point, but how often the students will be going to the main building. And do you have any idea of what they will be going to the building for? Is it the physical education, lunch, the auditorium? And I guess I wonder the impact on those spaces and the impact on the students. The halls are not going to get bigger. The auditorium is not going to get bigger. The lunchroom is not going to get bigger. And what we were looking for was program equity in having 2 schools of equal size. And we were looking at the best learning environment for students. And smaller is better, and equal is better. And I want to take you back to 2003, 2004 enrollment. At Lower Merion is 1,495, and Harrington High School, it was 845. Now, right before we opened the new schools, we had that inequity. So are we going to have that again? And are we going to have the same problems again? Because that is not in the best interests of our students. It is not fair to their learning environment. It is not fair to the use of the building. It's just unfair, and it doesn't level the playing field. Thank you.
I do have a quick question. Mr. Hughes gave a presentation about how he anticipated the new building would be used if the students were here. Is that the plan that the administration would be going forward with, or is there going to be another public meeting where we discuss how the building, what classes would be offered in this building?
The administration's working to finalize the plan, but it's under the basic framework that Mr. Hughes laid out. And that framework was that a block of classes, 9th graders would take in this building, and they'd be in the main building for lunch and electives and all those other kinds of things. But essentially about half of their schedule would be in this building and half of their schedule would be in the main building, and we would cluster classes together, like go to English class, then social studies class, then perhaps phys ed here, all in this building, and then go over to the main building for a block of classes, and whether you're returning or not, I guess depends on the schedule. So yes, that's the framework that we're moving forward with. There's a lot of detail to work out.
Okay, thanks.
One quick question. Vic, do we anticipate paying for these costs through capital reserves, through bonds?
Bonds.
And if we use bonds, will we have the ability to duplicate what we did for the borrowings for the current projects?
You could wrap the debt around, correct, similar to what we did with the bond we just issued.
Okay.
But we haven't consulted with bond counsel.
We haven't,
on
yeah,
any of
haven't,
that.
I haven't consulted with PFM to see, you know, with the impact on the Act One and so forth, but we have to do some more work on that. So once if we have a plan and know what the costs are and timeline, then we can
But
plan
regardless
something
of which
accordingly.
course of action we undertake, we're going to be, it appears we're going to be borrowing money, so maybe sooner than later, we should start getting some sense what we can do. Because it would help with the planning, knowing how the costs will be dropped into the operating budget.
I'll consult with them.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Susan Guthrie, Marine Station. I just want to harken back to a comment that was made last night and I think at a prior meeting as well regarding the scenarios and uncertainty, and ask that if you could please modify and going forward present these cost numbers for the two scenarios that have been considered or were considered in the spring at least, that are grounded in some historical basis, and that would be the 40% choosing Lower Merion that we see now, and the 75% choosing Lower Merion High School prior to 2009. If those two, if the cost estimates are provided for those two scenarios, it allows the public to determine whatever range in between those they want. It would bracket a high and a low, as opposed to now where the two scenarios seem to be somewhat ad hoc, and I think it's difficult for the public to know what the potentially best case and worst case scenarios are. Thank you.
Would you mind signing in?
Nobody else? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.